Ontario's government says it's taking action to clear homeless encampments. The province's premier, Doug Ford, says new legislation is coming that would give municipalities new tools. And he says he's open to using the notwithstanding clause if necessary. The CBC's Lorenda Redekop has the details.
The Ontario government is cracking down on encampments like this one, set to table new legislation next week, aimed at removing all encampments across the province. Premier Doug Ford wrote a letter to a dozen Ontario mayors concerned about tents in parks, telling them enough is enough. Among the changes he says his government will bring in, more money to create more capacity in shelters, prohibiting the use of illicit drugs in public, and stiffer penalties for people who deliberately and continually break the law. And he says our government is fully prepared to use the notwithstanding clause.
We want encampments gone. We want people to be able to enjoy their parks again. We fully understand that many people who are in encampments are suffering from mental health and addictions. There will be additional resources for that, but we've heard people loud and clear.
This comes after 12 mayors first wrote to the Premier back in October, asking him to act, including through using the notwithstanding clause if necessary. The Mayor of Barrie is one of them.
What we have had is where parents are coming in and saying, you know, this is not safe for my child to use this park right now because of the drug paraphernalia, or perhaps it's someone with some mental health issues.
But this community worker is frustrated.
We are catering to a handful of people to essentially criminalize and take away some of the charter rights of people who are marginalized and unhoused.
And make sure you tell
the Premier also says he doesn't believe the government will need to use the notwithstanding clause, overriding the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. He is promising more shelter spaces.
We're seeing that he's created a legal workaround potentially around this, which in this case, I worry again that if the shelter isn't built in time, if it's not actually accessible, are we still just going to evict people without having anywhere for them to go?
Toronto has had a history of encampment evictions, with some years ago getting violent. Toronto's mayor does not approve of the province's move, especially since shelters are full.
It does not matter if you have the ability to remove people if they have nowhere to go. That's why we're asking the province to partner with us on real solutions to end homelessness.
We're still waiting for more details on this new legislation. It's expected to be tabled late next week. Lorenda Redekop, CBC News, Toronto.
Okay, we're joined now by Diana Chan McNally, who you heard there in Lorenda's piece briefly, and she has more on her reaction to this. So thanks for joining us tonight. Let me talk a little bit about what your reaction is. And you heard some of the criticism there from Alex Nuttall, who is the mayor of Barrie. Next hour, we're going to be speaking with the mayor of Guelph. And they say, well, this is about community safety. What's your reaction to that?
I think in this case, we understand that there are safety issues both for people in encampments and also people who want to access parks. But ultimately, what's being asked here isn't going to actually end encampments in parks. Again, if there is not shelter or housing available, there is nowhere for people to go. Now, we've heard the Premier suggest that prisons or hospitals may be alternatives. But even if you agree with that, they too are full. So the likelihood that you will just see people moved from park to park is very real and very likely to happen if this legislation is put into place.
Okay, so let's talk about that then. If this legislation does get put into place and police and municipalities have the power to dismantle these encampments, what then happens? What happens to the shelter system and where do these folks go?
Well, again, this is it. We know that shelters are full. A lot of these municipalities are asking desperately for what I think is the wrong solution because they simply don't actually have available space for people to go. This is, I think, misguided. But again, I understand where it is coming from. As per Mayor Chow's comments, I think we need to see the province actually partner with municipalities on real solutions instead of giving them quote unquote tools, which really will remove the charter rights of an entire demographic group of people to essentially, again, not provide them with resources that will keep them off the street, but rather just to shuffle them around at cost to the taxpayers.
We did hear Mayor Chow say there that she wanted the province to partner with cities like Toronto. What are those alternative solutions, in your opinion?
Absolutely housing. Of course, we do need financing for shelters. And in this case, we have not gotten adequate funding from the provincial government across Ontario for this interim measure. But we also know the Ford government is failing abysmally on housing, which is the ultimate solution to this. Their housing starts are the lowest that they've been since 1955. Looking at this legislation that's being proposed, I think this is just to distract from their egregious record on housing and to put the blame directly onto homeless people themselves.
Is there anything that can be done in the short term? Because housing, as you know, that's a long-term solution sometimes. In the immediate, is there an alternative solution that you think would work better than this legislation?
We've seen in a number of municipalities, and in fact, most municipalities are not asking for this kind of remedy. We're talking about 12 mayors among 444 municipalities who never even consulted with their local councils or with the public. So in the interim, we can look at solutions like we've seen in Peterborough, for example, which has created tiny homes in conjunction with neighbors, but also with unhoused people themselves. And it's a solution that's working for everybody. Municipalities do know, for the most part, what to do. But again, they need the financing and the support in order to do this. So in the interim, these kinds of solutions, we know they work, and we could see the Ford government actually fund them.
The province has made a fundamental shift in recent months in its approach to homelessness and addiction, including closing safe consumption sites and proposing addiction recovery hubs. How has this shift affected people over the past few months?
I mean, I think there's a lot of stress. If we look at the closure of safe consumption sites, we know that these have saved many lives, thousands of lives in the years that they've been open. And what we're going to see instead is that people will be forced to use in public. Now, at the same time, this proposed legislation, we haven't seen it yet, but it seems to be proposing that we will criminalize drug use in public. Well, you just shut down these sites. You're saying that you can't use in public. What you're going to see is that people will be pushed into libraries, community centers, shopping malls, your local coffee shop like the Tim Hortons, using drugs or finding shelter in there, who will then maybe die or be criminalized because they have no other spaces to access.
Mm-hmm. Well, so going back to what Alex Nuttall said about, a parent with their kid walking to a park, what would you say to that parent if they, said to you, okay, well, I do want to go outside with my kids and I can't go to this park because there's this encampment there and I feel unsafe? What would you tell that parent directly?
We can be on the same side of this issue. I may not have the same feelings as this person, but ultimately, again, the only solution to this in the long term is housing. So I get it. I get that it's something that's uncomfortable, that people are afraid of, but the solution is not to criminalize people and, again, just move them around from park to park. It's to join people like me across political lines and advocate to the government for the housing that we actually need. We can come together on this.
Okay, Diana, have to leave it there. Appreciate your time tonight. That's Diana Chan McNally, who is a community worker and advocate, joining us from Toronto. Okay, our next guest is one of the mayors that called on the Ford government to take action. Cam Guthrie is the mayor of Guelph, Ontario, and he joins us from that city tonight. Mr. Mayor, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Set the scene for me. What is the situation in Guelph like right now?
Well, we have approximately 20 or so encampments as the last numbers were taken. And we have probably in the 60 to 70 range of what we've been told might be in some of the encampments. We have a bylaw that we passed just recently that actually is one of the most permissive bylaws going. We actually allow encampments in about 90% of the places within our community. And we actually protect those that are in encampments 24/7. If they're in the dedicated spots that are allowed, we allow that to happen. There's only a few areas within our community that we call sensitive areas where we don't allow them to happen, near our waterways, as an example, near some of the splash pads or sports fields, or in our downtown core where we were having a lot of problems with an encampment down there. And so we found that this bylaw has worked well. But of course, we're always on edge like other municipalities, whether or not we're going to be challenged in court with legal issues in regards to these issues that we're facing around encampments and trying to create public spaces that are safe and welcoming for everyone.
So let's talk about what Mayor Ford is proposing here. And he says he'll use the notwithstanding clause if necessary. Do you think that homeless encampments warrant such an extreme measure?
Well, in some cases, actually, yes. And I'm going to be blunt. There are sensitive public areas that I think do warrant the ability to have encampments removed, especially when shelter space or units are being continually offered to people and they just flat out refuse. And those sensitive areas are impacting what I would say is the rights of other people in the community. The mom that wants to safely push that stroller down the street and not be interfered with in some of the unsafe conditions that these encampments bring to those areas. The Little League baseball team that wants to go to the baseball diamond and can't. These are the types of scenarios that are happening in our communities where I think there has to be some balance and public order brought back to the situation.
So we have heard that from some mayors, including the mayor of Barrie and the folks that have signed this letter to the province. But other mayors have taken a different approach. The mayor of Toronto, Olivia Chow, does not think that this move is warranted. She wants to partner with the province for real solutions. And homeless advocates say that, if you're going to tear down these encampments, those folks are just going to move somewhere else. So it's kind of like whack-a-mole here. Does this seem like a sustainable long-term solution? Because where do these people go if you just take down an encampment? Don't they have to go somewhere?
They do have to go somewhere, and that somewhere is usually defined by many of the different bylaws across the province with different municipalities where they are already legally allowed to be and to be protected. But there are certain circumstances where people are continuing to refuse to leave areas that should be a normal public open space used by everyone that should be safe and welcoming to everyone. And so that's why I feel like if it's necessary, and that's what the mayor's asked for, if it's necessary, I think a lot of people and some of the activists and some others are trying to portray this as an either or scenario. And that is not anything like what we are trying to ask for. Of course, housing, units, supportive housing, shelter is what the mayors want, and that's a priority. But in some cases, we do need to make sure we have public order. And so the direction that the premier is taking is something that I am welcoming, and I think a lot of people in communities will welcome as well.
Okay. Mayor, appreciate your perspective on this. Come back again. That is the mayor of Guelph, Ontario, Cam Guthrie. You're welcome.